What I'm about to tell you is probably going to sound insane, but by the end of this, if you watch, you will probably never see the world the same way again. Recently, the smartest people in physics just figured out something that's going to mess with your head. You don't exist. Well, at least not in the way that you think you do. You are literally 99.9999999% empty space. Your brain, mostly nothing. Your hand, mostly nothing. That solid feeling when you touch something, completely an illusion, which raises an uncomfortable question. If you're mostly nothing, what exactly is watching this video right now? But here's where it even gets crazier. The physicists are starting to whisper that maybe nothing is the only thing that actually is real. Everything else? Just nothing pretending to be something. My name is Len Cook, and I'm about to show you why they may be right, and by the end of this video, you may never see reality quite the same way. And if you think you're ready to have your mind completely blown, hit that like and subscribe button, because what we're about to discover is going to stick with you long after this video ends. Let's start with what might be the biggest mistake in human history. It all began with one guy who was way too confident about rocks. Ancient Greece, around 400 BC, there's this philosopher named Democritus. One day he's staring at a rock like it owes him money. Suddenly he had what he thinks is the ultimate insight about reality. He's like, what if, he says, probably gesturing dramatically because ancient Greeks love that stuff. We just keep cutting this rock in half until we literally can't cut it anymore. Eventually we'll find the smallest possible piece, the thing that cannot be divided. He called it atomos, literally meaning uncuttable, or the atom as we call it now. The fundamental Lego block of everything. And for over 2,000 years, humanity just nods along like, yeah, that sounds about right. Tiny solid balls, final answer, case closed. Fast forward to the 20th century. We finally build tools sophisticated enough to crack open those supposedly uncuttable atoms. And what do we find inside? Surprise, more stuff. Protons, neutrons, electrons, all dancing around in there like a microscopic rave. Okay, we sing. Slightly embarrassed. Okay, sure, these are the real building blocks. These have to be the solid, true base of reality, right? So naturally, we crack those open too. And what do we find? We find quarks, leptons, muons, bosons, a whole particle zoo that sounds like Dr. Seuss decided to get really into physics and just started making words up. But what are those made of? We ask, getting a little desperate now, because obviously there has to be a fundamental part of reality, right? Well, according to quantum physics, and here's where reality really starts laughing at us. Vibrating strings. One-dimensional objects dancing in 11 dimensions, most of which apparently don't exist in a way we can possibly comprehend. This is also known as string theory, which is a fascinating thing, and based on the evidence that we have about the universe, one of the best explanations of how reality is made, even though a lot of it doesn't make any sense. So we went from reality is made of tiny solid balls to reality is invisible cosmic music performed by dancers we can't see, in dimensions that might not even be real. We don't know, because we haven't seen them. But here's a part that should make you stop and think. Democritus wasn't actually wrong about atoms being uncuttable. He was just completely hilariously wrong about them being actually a thing. Because apparently, all atoms that makes up our universe, our cells, our body, everything that you see, taste, and touch, everything that you experience about the universe appears to be mostly made of nothing or entirely made of nothing. So how does this make any sense? Now you might be thinking, okay, but at least empty space is actually empty, right? It turns out what we call empty space is actually throwing the most chaotic subatomic party in the universe, 24/7, no cover charge. Quantum field theory, which is our best, most accurate description of how tiny things behave, tells us that the vacuum is constantly exploding with what we call virtual particles. These little troublemakers pop into existence out of literally nothing, exist for a nanosecond, and then vanish again like they were never there. This happens all the time. So imagine empty space where there's no physical matter. So it's a true void. But it's not a true void because there's this endless sea of invisible little particles that appear and disappear and appear and disappear. And we know that this is actually happening. This is not a theory. It's actually been tested and proven that this is happening. So where did they come from? Because there was nothing there to begin with. And where did they go? Unless there's something there. And if there's something there, How is that then nothing? And if there is, this just doesn't make any sense. When you look at the universe itself, the universe is 99.99999% empty space. I'll get into more of that in a little bit. Surrounded by what? Is it in a sea of nothing? How does that make sense? What is nothing? Why is it so important? And why do we keep on asking this question about nothing for thousands of years? So you would be right in saying this is just some theoretical weirdness. How could we possibly know that this is actually happening? That's an excellent and a fair question. But we know because we can actually measure it. We do actually know. For example, there's this one experiment called the Kashmir effect. And this is going to blow your mind if I explain it right. If you take two perfectly flat metal plates, bring them close together in a perfect vacuum, and I mean perfect, like better vacuum than outer space, and then something impossible happens. The plates get pushed together by literally nothing, literally by the pressure of empty space. Think about that for a moment. There's absolutely nothing in there, and somehow these two pieces of metal are drawn together. We don't really have a good explanation as to why. So then is something in there? If there's a force, there has to be some sort of a force that's pushing it together, but yet there's nothing there that we know of. So what we know from this is that somehow empty space has pressure. The vacuum has a weight of some kind. Nothing is surprisingly ridiculously busy. And here's the kicker. We're not just observing this weirdness, we're actually using it. Engineers use the Kashmir effect to build incredibly sensitive measuring devices. We've literally figured out how to harness the power of nothingness. Think about what that means for a second. We've weaponized the void. We've turned nothing into a tool. We've convinced emptiness to work for us. How can something be nothing and nothing be something? There's this blurry line of what is reality and what isn't. It goes so much deeper and so much more mysterious than this. Here's what really should have tipped us off, that something was up with nothing. And it happened way before we had particle accelerators or quantum mechanics. I'm talking about what might be the most world-changing invention in human history. And I guarantee it's not what you're thinking. It's not the wheel. It's not fire. It's not even the internet. It's literally nothing. Or more specifically, zero represented for nothing. For most of human civilization, and I mean thousands and thousands of years, zero didn't exist. Try to think about trying to do math now if zero didn't exist. How would you do that? But the concept simply wasn't there. It's like trying to imagine a color that doesn't exist. People literally could not think their way to nothing. It just didn't exist in their vocabulary, in their world. The Romans tried to do mathematics without zero. And let me tell you, it was painful to watch, like trying to play music without silence or telling a joke without timing. Technically possible, but absolutely excruciating for everyone involved. Medieval Europeans not only couldn't handle the concept of zero, they actually thought it was blasphemous. How dare you suggest that nothing is something? That's against God. But then, this is where the story gets really good. Medieval Indian mathematicians show up to the scene like the universe's first successful negotiators with the void. Picture this, it's around 600 AD, and this brilliant mathematician named Brahmagupta walked into the cosmic marketplace of ideas with the most audacious business proposal in history. Gentlemen, he says, I'd like to make a deal with nothing. Everyone else is like, Brahmagupta, you can't negotiate with nothing. It doesn't exist. It's not real. So Brahmagupta just smiles and says, exactly. That's why I'm going to get such a great deal. And somehow this absolute madman convinces nothingness to become not just part of mathematics, but the foundation of it. He doesn't just give zero a place on the table. He makes it the table. Think about the sheer audacity here. This man looked directly into the void and said, you know what? I bet you'd be absolutely fantastic at holding places in equations. You seem like management material. You want a job? And Zero said, yes, sure, no problem. I have nothing else to do. The result? Suddenly we can do decimal mathematics, invent calculus, build computers, create an entire digital world. Your smartphone is literally performing millions of negotiations between something and nothing billions of times per second, zero and ones. Our entire digital world is based on 0 and 1, nothing and something, nothing and something. And with that, we can create everything that we're seeing in our modern world. Ancient Indian mathematicians didn't just discover zero, they convinced nothing to work for them. That's not just mathematical genius. That's the greatest sales pitch ever made. What do you want to pay for it? Nothing. Okay, I'm going to invent nothing that didn't exist before, and now it's at least an option. That's brilliant. Now, while Western philosophy was busy trying to prove that things definitely, absolutely, positively exist, Eastern traditions were sitting there asking a very difficult question. Yeah, but do they though? And here's a connection that's going to make your brain do a little backflip. They figured out what modern physics is just now discovering, thousands of years before we had particle accelerators, quantum computers, or even decent telescopes. Buddhism talks about something called sunyata, which gets translated as emptiness. But that's like calling the ocean wet. The word is doing way more heavy lifting than the translation suggests. It's more like everything that is there is not the way that you think it's there, which I know sounds like some sort of philosophical word salad that makes you want to throw things, until you realize it's actually the most precise description of quantum mechanics ever written, and it was written 2,500 years before we invented the tools to prove it. Taoism goes even further with this. The Tao, otherwise known as the Way, literally cannot be named. They weren't trying to be mysterious or deep, they were being scientifically accurate. How do you name the silence that makes music possible? How do you describe the canvas that makes the painting visible? And then there's meditation, which is literally the practice of sitting with doing nothing. No thoughts, no goals, no agendas, just presence in the void. If nothing was nothing and not important, then why would the secret to expanding your mind and connecting with the universe and everything else require you to empty your mind and think about nothing? That just seems so fascinating to me. There's a connection there that needs to be explored. Every single spiritual tradition, every meditation practice, every mindfulness technique throughout human history has had the same bizarre goal: get to nothing, think of nothing, be nothing. We've always kind of just glossed over this as like, well, it's just more of a metaphor, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's literally the goal is to understand and harmonize with nothing, because nothing is the only thing that really even exists at all, which still makes no sense, because if something exists, it's no longer nothing. I digress. So why would nothing be the destination? Why would emptiness be the prize that everyone's trying to win? And here's the part that should make you question everything. People who actually do this, who spend years getting really, really good at being nothing, they all report the exact same thing. The closer they get to nothing, the more real everything becomes. What? Which should make no sense and be completely impossible. But as we're discovering, impossible might be the most accurate word we have for describing reality. So going further, speaking of impossible, let's talk about you for a minute, because you, my friend, are literally impossible. And dare I say, you might not even exist. Hear me out. Here's a thought experiment that's going to mess with your head. If a single atom were scaled to the size of a football stadium, like one of those massive NFL ones, the nucleus at the center would be about the size of a marble sitting on the 50-yard line. The electrons, they'll be tiny specks of dust orbiting somewhere out in the parking lot. Everything else in the center of this atom, in the stadium, would be completely, perfectly empty. Let that sink in for a moment. Your atoms, which are believed to be the fundamental building blocks of reality for the most part, are made of something. They're incredibly small, but the space that's in them is 99.999999% nothing. So, yet there's something. It doesn't make any sense. But then when you take those little particles, electrons and neutrons and the protons, which are barely anything in that atom together, and you start breaking it down, then you find that those are made of literally empty space. And then you start breaking those down and you find out that those are literally empty space, to the point where it looks like they're just vibrations. Again, circling back to string theory. When you look at space, space is about as empty between stars and planets and everything else is about 99.99999% empty space. But somehow, and I really think about this, somehow you feel solid. You have thoughts, emotions, the ability to fall in love, get frustrated, the experience that very specific kind of rage when someone chews too loudly. How is this even possible? Here's the answer that's going to change how you think about yourself forever. You're not actually a thing, you're a pattern. Let me think of it this way. Think of yourself as a whirlpool in a river. It is a clear shape, it persists over time. You can point to it and say, there's the whirlpool. But what is it actually made out of? Water? Just water temporarily convinced to something else? Is it really the water? Is it a shape? It's the shape in the water. So it's making something out of nothing, which is kind of like matter in human existence. So most of what you are made of is literally space, empty space. If you truly want to know who and what you are, that would make sense as to why meditation is so fixated on learning and focusing on nothing, considering nothing is most of what you are and the universe exists in. And everything else is kind of a fabrication, but yet here we exist. The boundary between you and not you, that's just an arbitrary line we draw in what is actually a continuous field of existence. You're not in the universe, you are the universe. Locally organized as you, and doing such a good job of it, you've convinced yourself you're separate from everything else. You're a pattern of emptiness that somehow became aware of itself. It's like the whirlpool that you saw in the river deciding to give itself a name. You're literally the void looking back at itself and going, damn, I'm actually pretty interesting when I put my mind to it. And this brings us to something that should make every single human being stop dead in their tracks and question everything they think they know about existence. Look around you right now, your room, your furniture, maybe glance out the window of the world outside. Everything you're seeing right now, every single thing your eyes can detect represents less than 5% of what we actually know exists in the universe. I'm not being poetic here. I'm being literal, scientifically and mathematically accurate. We've mapped the entire universe, right? We've figured out a lot of stuff. Well, we've only figured out about 5% of it, though. We know these other forces exist in the universe, but we don't have a true understanding of what they are. For example, dark energy, this completely mysterious force that makes the entire universe expand faster and faster, literally stretching the fabric of space-time itself, makes up about 68% of everything that exists. Dark matter, which is an invisible scaffolding that holds every galaxy together, including our own, accounts for another 27%. Regular matter, the stuff we can see, touch, photograph, complain about, and turn into TikTok videos, is only about 5%. But think about this for a second. 95% of reality is completely invisible to us. We know it's there because of what it does to the 5% we can see, not because we have any idea what it actually is. It's like living in a house where you can only see one room out of 20, but you know the other 19 rooms exist because you can hear footsteps, feel doors closing, sense the movement of something, but you just have no idea what it is. Actually, that's not even a good enough analogy. It's more like swimming in an ocean. You only can see the foam on the top of the waves. The entire ocean, all the water is completely invisible to you. You only know it exists because the foam is floating on something. So there has to be something else there. You just don't know what it is. That's us. We're swimming in an ocean of invisible reality so vast that everything we've ever seen, touched, or experienced is basically just a few drops of foam. But here's a thought that might change everything. What if dark matter and dark energy aren't dark because they're hidden or mysterious? What if they're dark because they're transparent? What if they're dark because they're nothing? What if the vast majority of reality is just the void being impossibly good at its job? Now, this brings us to the most extreme example of nothing doing something absolutely impossible: black holes. If we're all just patterns dancing in the void, then black holes are what happens when the void decides to dance so intensely that it literally breaks the known laws of physics. And here's a connection that's going to blow your mind. Remember how every meditation practice aims for the same thing, getting to nothing? Black holes are basically the universe's version of that. They're meditation retreats for matter. Think about it. Everything goes in, nothing comes out, and somehow this creates the most powerful objects in the entire universe. Wonder if we should meditate on black holes and if that would actually have any impact. It's kind of like the universe's way of saying, "Oh, you think you understand gravity? Hold my space-time and watch this." At the center of every black hole, according to our best mathematics, is something called a singularity. It's a point of infinite density, but it occupies zero volume. Think about that for a moment. Infinite something in zero space. Some of these black holes are absolutely gigantously huge, bigger than our entire solar system by far. But their core takes up no space at all. It's a complete enigma that doesn't make any sense. It's kind of like the universe's most aggressive meditation technique. All matter, all energy, all information gets compressed down to what? Pure possibility, pure potential, pure nothing. But here's what connects black holes to everything we've been discovering. They're not actually destroying information, they're transforming it. Taking all this complex patterns of matter and energy and compressing them into something so fundamental that we don't even have words for it. These cosmic nothings bend space-time around themselves like it's Play-Doh. They eat entire stars for breakfast and then organize whole galaxies around themselves like the universe's most efficient event planners. So what have we actually discovered today? You are 99.9999999% empty space, having a temporary experience of being solid. You are nothing dreaming is something, and somehow, impossibly, beautifully, that nothing is capable of love, creativity, wonder, the ability to question its own existence while making terrible jokes about atoms. What if nothing isn't the opposite of something, but it's the source of everything? What if every single thing in the universe is just nothing having a really elaborate, really convincing daydream? What if you, your memories, your personality, that voice in your head that's listening to these words right now are all just patterns of emptiness that have gotten really, really good at pretending to be separate from everything else? And here's the part that might actually change your life. What if realizing this doesn't make you less real, but infinitely more interesting? Because if you're nothing pretending to be something, then you're participating in the universe's greatest magic trick. You're not just observing reality, you are reality, and temporarily convinced it's you. The ancient Indian mathematicians were right. Zero isn't just a number, it's the foundation everything else is built on. The Buddhist monks were right. Emptiness isn't the absence of everything, it's the presence of infinite possibility. Maybe the physicists are right. The universe is mostly nothing, and that nothing is extraordinarily busy creating everything we think is something, like binary code in our digital world. If the universe is mostly nothing, then maybe we are too. And if that bothers you, good. That means you're still thinking, you're still feeling, still asking questions, which means nothing is still doing its job perfectly. Drop a comment and let me know. After everything we've explored today, what's your relationship with nothingness? Do you see yourself differently now? Do you see the world differently? Has anything that I brought up made you think about anything in a different way? Even during the process of making this, I've thought about, you never hear anybody talking about a meditation for a black hole. Maybe there's value there. Maybe not. Could be nothing. But if any of this resonates with you, please do consider hitting that like and subscribe. And also, please do consider joining my Patreon. I consider my Patreon members co-creators of this channel, and they keep this channel from becoming nothing. So what have we really learned today? Nothing. Or maybe that's everything. I'm Len Cook, and this is the Maverick Mind. See you in the void. Or maybe not. Take care.